Hey, and welcome to this special podcast takeover from Amsterdam Dance Event 2022, where I was really lucky to be on the ground capturing insights with several industry leaders from label owners, artists, investors, founders, promoters, journalists, and many, many more. ADE is the largest dance music gathering in the world for professionals and fans alike, and it takes place over 5 days with 600 speakers, 2,500 artists, 1,000 events, and 450,000 visitors from around the globe. And after 3 really hard years for our industry, it was honestly incredible to connect again with stakeholders in the music ecosystem and discuss urgent topics such as sustainability for live events, mental health for artists and professionals, social change, and strategies for the future of electronic music. The dates have been announced for ADE 2023, and I already can't wait for next year. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's conversation with Ben Turner, a regular Billboard Dance Power Player and one of the biggest changemakers in the electronic music industry, and this is why. He founded Graphite Media, which specialises in artist management and brand partnerships, that manages Richie Hawtin, Anna, and Sama Abdul Hadi, unarguably 3 of the biggest names in the techno scene. He's also the co-founder of IMS in Ibiza with Pete Tong, which is often described as the TED of music conferences. In 2013, he formed the Association for Electronic Music for Advocacy and Change, designed to represent the genre globally. Its intention is to preserve, protect, and promote the electronic music industry worldwide. He's also an investor and an advisor to Plus 8 Equity, an early-stage VC that invests in groundbreaking music technology companies like Splice, Lander, and Endel, and who we had on the show earlier. Ben has also authored 3 books on the culture of dance music and produced over 30 TV shows and documentaries about dance music. And last, but most certainly not least, Ben is also the co-founder of Pixelix alongside Deadmau5, which is a company focused on the intersection and integration of digital collectibles and avatars in the gaming world. I'm in absolute awe of the work he does, and I'm really excited for you to hear our conversation. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us on Mission Makers. We're delighted to have you here today, and we are, as we're speaking, we're halfway through ADE. What have been some of your goals going into this year's conference?
Well, I think it's strange to be back because of post-COVID, just reconnecting with all these people in the physical world, in person. It feels really, really different because we've just not been used to that way of working, doing like meetings every 30 minutes and just, I don't know, it just feels very different. But overwhelmingly, positively, is 500,000 people here in Amsterdam. You can barely walk down the street and people are here for this culture that we've all helped cultivate and build and that we're so passionate about. And from talks and panels to workshops to parties, it's just everywhere you go is all consuming. So it's, you say we're halfway through. I think I'm nearly close to the end, but I guess it goes on till Sunday, Monday. But yeah, it's a huge celebration of everything that this culture has become. And when you just see the scale of what it is now, it's pretty mind-blowing. You know?
Absolutely, and it's great to be back and reconnect with the industry. So what have been some of the key takeaways that you've observed and also the critical messages that you've wanted to share this week?
Well, definitely, if you think about pre-pandemic, Web3, metaverse, NFTs, that wasn't even in our vocabulary. It wasn't even in our well, certainly for me, a little bit before we were starting to look at how gaming and music could converge, but no one could have seen what came. And I think the pandemic really allowed that NFT world to kind of, cultivate in a way itself. But we're only now beginning to see the results of all the experiments that artists are doing, whether it's Dixon or Richie Hawtin or Portrait EXO, or, there's so many amazing people who've gone very deep on this. And I do think overwhelmingly that has been what's come out of ADE this week. There's so many talks and experiments and ideas of creativity, but monetization, which to me is where I got excited about NFTs. For a musician, it's more about the visual arts. But actually for a musician like Rich, it's also about monetization. And there are so many cracks in our industry that we've felt for 25 years or 30 years I've been in this business, where it's always frustrated me why people don't get paid for their work, or why collecting societies monopolize all this music, all this money, and don't distribute it fairly. So Web3 to me was a promise, a belief that actually with the help of blockchain, we could finally make sure money went into the right places. we're such at an early stage of that there's no guarantees it can achieve what we hope, but it's heading in the right direction. And these last few days have been full of new companies, all kinds of innovation around how to resolve these issues. And I feel there's a willingness and an understanding now within this industry that this is priority number one. 10 years ago when I was pushing this message of get paid, most people weren't listening, and now I feel everyone understands that the DJs are nothing without the music, and the people who are making the music are suffering and they're not earning money because of streaming. And so I think it's upon our whole industry to listen, learn, and innovate and fill these cracks. And whether that, I think just to finally say on Web3, whether the cracks can be filled or whether it's just about starting a new model, it's somewhere in between, and I think so that to me has been really amazing. Those are all the conversations I've left very inspired by this week.
Nice. I mean, I think you're right, as you say. In a way, it's exciting, although we're in obviously early adoption phase, and it's this technology's been around for a few years. It's the fact that everyone wants that change, and so they're excited whether or not it works. It's the fact that as a collective society, we want to see that change happen, and we're at a moment where we can build a better and safer and more trusted internet.
No, I agree, and I think there's an older generation like me. I'm nearly 50. Who've been around forever, who maybe not me, but a lot of people have just accepted that it's broken and it will never get fixed. But when I look at the younger generation, they're like, that's not right. How did you guys allow this to happen for 25 years and you didn't try to fix it?
Exactly.
And I don't want that on my conscience. And that's why I create IMS. That's why I created a trade body called the Association for Electronic Music. And the work that AFEM has been doing for 10 years is to shine a light on this huge, immoral situation. And we didn't know how to fix it. We just knew that it had to be exploited. And now people are starting to come out of the woodworks, Pioneer, DJ Monitor, what Rich is doing, A-Slice with DVS1. There's all these different ways. None of them are perfect, but actually they're all trying to get to this middle point where people are getting what they deserve. And you do see it in other genres of music, but there's something about electronic music that's so DIY, it's so independent. That's what inspired us about this music. That's why we loved it. That's why we all became successful at what we did, because it was an open landscape to create your own ventures. But somehow, we're suffering more than I think many other genres of music.
And sometimes things have to get so broken before it just fundamentally cannot exist. And in a way, the pandemic hopefully has reset and shone a light on some of these.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a huge watershed moment of realization. And I just see it from my side with projects I'm involved in. People who we've been chasing for 5 years to pay them royalties couldn't even find the time to send us an invoice. And suddenly the pandemic hit and everyone's collecting every bit of money that was out there. And hopefully in that year they learn that money may not be important in the grand schemes of what you earn, but it's your money and you should claim it and you should have a system that collects it. So I think it's a very exciting time. I think I was around in the .com era, when that kind of was introduced. I'm pre-internet, like a dinosaur, and I think that was the most exciting time for me as somebody who was in a very physical. I was a print journalist at the time, and suddenly the internet, and I was able to express our content through the web. Now for music artists, it's almost like MTV, the introduction of MTV. When suddenly everyone had a video and they had a creative idea to express their music. With Web3, we have this potential again where a lot of artists who are very unvisual in what they do and very just linear or very audio driven can now find a way to express themselves through the visual format of what the metaverse offers and what NFTs are offering. Suddenly there's a focus and attention and more of an interest in the visual arts. And that's extremely exciting.
Yeah, I think as a creator, when you're an artist, whether you only create through music, actually it unlocks so much creativity in a different way, and it also takes away the reliance on things like streaming. And I don't know if you believe whether the mindset shift can ever be regained back to actually pay, for music because of things like Spotify and YouTube and all these things. I don't know. I mean, I'm curious about your opinion, but at least these offer other ways to, have another, diversify your income source, but also it's just ridiculous that, not many industries operate where, the payments are so appalling and that you don't know when your next paycheck's coming for many artists. So
yeah, I think, in what you said there, I think what NFTs, what I've always felt the promise of NFTs was, is it brings you back to what it used to be like to own an album. I bought an album because I loved the music, or I just somehow quite often fell in love with the artwork and the packaging. And it just felt like it was part of my life, and I had something tangible now, and it was an emotional relationship with that piece of music. And the creative that was often done with album artwork and the campaigns around it and the videos and the photography, quite a mainstream reference, but U2 Joshua Tree when I was very young. I loved the album, I loved the music, artwork was beautiful, the documentary, the singles, the Anton Corbijn photos, them in the Joshua Tree, the whole thing just connected, and I felt like I was in that world. And I understood why the record sounded like it did, because it introduced me to America, it introduced me to the desert and all of those things and the politics. And I think what we're trying to do with some of the projects we're involved in is, how can you bring that back? How can you make a record that isn't just about the audio? It has a visual message, it has a narrative, it has a political message, and visualize that through digital art, moving art. And that's, to me, brings it back to that thought process of like, don't just make the record and stick it on Spotify. Think about the whole creative campaign, think about the visualization of it, storytelling, narrative. And I think then you engage with people on a much deeper level, and they understand a bit more about the artist.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, just from Spotify, what do you get? A little picture this small as my little finger that you're supposed to have an emotional resonance with that. I think that's been, I feel this year at ADE, last year I came to ADE, I was very in Web3 a year ago, and I felt like no one was talking about it in terms of what was being offered here. I've come here this year and it's transformational, which is exciting.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you've touched on a lot, and it is that sort of time. And I read on your LinkedIn recently that age 23, you moderated a panel here at ADE as a second year of ADE and as your first time moderating at ADE. And you said on your LinkedIn that you felt you were completely out of your depth. And you've gone on to achieve, remarkable things for this industry, to protect, to preserve, to promote, electronic music. And of course, one of those things, most notably, is founding IMS Ibiza, which is dubbed as the TED of our industry. So I'm just curious, what have you learned about moderating over these years?
I've learned that I don't like doing it. And even though I run my own summit conference, I don't know, somehow when you're younger, you're a bit more fearless. I sat on the stage, and I was trying to think who it was, but it was definitely Derek May, it's definitely Carl Craig and Claude Young, people I looked up to massively at the time. And yet I wasn't the first generation. I wasn't into dance music in 88, 89, 90. I came into it 91, 92. So I already felt I wasn't qualified enough to really, and people in the industry made you feel like that. There's a sort of London clique that made you feel like, well, you weren't there at the beginning, so who the hell are you to come in? But all I ever tried to do was to be positive, proactive, and promote and push the music forwards. So in a situation like that, I got to know all of those original Detroit, Chicago guys because I interviewed all of them. I spent time at their houses. I spent time in their studios. I went to Chicago, Detroit, New York. I went to all of them and spent time with them. So, I was thrust into that particular panel, and I didn't even think about it. Now running my own conference, I really think twice about agreeing to interview anybody. Hard to explain what it is. I think maybe it's just the stress of my life and not having enough time to really think about what it is. But
you have to give it your best self, of course, otherwise it doesn't do justice to the conversation and the audience. At the same time, and I noticed it in this conference, I think you've only had one thing, which was with Jaguar, right? Yeah. Actually going back to what we were talking about earlier as well, like the shelf life of music and the fact that, like, what you touched upon is it's important, because to create those different touch points is what hopefully gives this more timeless experience with music. And of course, now touching upon the artists that you're involved with, I mean, you manage several groundbreaking artists, Richie Hawtin, Anna, Sama, they're all from such different walks of life as well. They've all come from different countries, different cultures, different experiences. I'm very curious about the kind of management principles that you have that guides your leadership to these artists that are so different and unique in and of themselves and what they're passionate about. I'm
just drawn to people with purpose, people who have a mission, who have a suffering, or have a suffering maybe is the wrong word, but
an obstacle that they may become.
But I think purpose is the key word. Like, they have a mission. With Rich, it's technology, innovation. With Sama, it's resilience, it's what she grew up with and how she lives her life day to day and wants to help the Middle East movement. Anna's found this incredible purpose around wellness and well-being and how that can relate to her music. And they've all got their journeys and their vision, and I love that. There's so many amazing producers who just make great music, but there's not much to say about them, and they don't have much to say. Whereas I think I've just always been drawn to those kinds of artists, really, and that's what I look for. You could make the best music in the world, and I could think you're going to be as big as Calvin Harris, but if you've got nothing to say, I don't know what I could do with you.
Yeah.
And I think because I come from a very strong media content background as a journalist in the first 10 years of my life, and then produced and directed TV shows and documentaries about our culture, I've always been focused on the story and the narrative and the meaning, and that's just what's always driven me.
It's all about purpose. If you don't have that clarity, you can spend 20 years in this industry in a haze, and you will still come out of it asking the same question. And in the end, someday, somewhere, somehow. And
that's, I think, in a way, what I tried to translate through IMS, and also then AFEM is just, IMS is a reflection of what I'm feeling and experiencing in the music business, my frustrations, my challenges, monetization. What are the issues of the day? Mental health became a massive thing for IMS through my own experiences of losing countless of people through suicide in the music industry. And like, why aren't we talking about this? And then suddenly Avicii passed away, and suddenly everyone wanted to talk about it. And I just think it's everything has got to be purpose driven. For me to be inspired, interested, and engaged.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, and touching upon these hats, because you of course do wear many, and whether it's being on the advisory board for +8, Pixelix, you've also, as you said, you've written 3 books, directed over 30 TV shows and documentaries. I mean, it's phenomenal, and that specifically about dance music. I mean, that's amazing.
That's all I know.
I mean, that's just a small summary of some of the achievements that you've and contributions that you made to the scene. And I'm curious to know, like, what would be your advice to fellow artists who are also similarly passionate about many things, about entrepreneurship, but they're also passionate about changing the scene and taking their art extremely seriously, but like wearing many hats, Hey, I hope you're enjoying today's show. And of course, if you are, a little review or share with your friends would be much appreciated. But I just want to take a quick pause to share some interesting news that Mission Makers has unexpectedly grown into becoming a boutique podcast agency. And for the last year and a half, we've secretly been producing content for some high-impact brands, from tech unicorns in Silicon Valley to disruptive companies at Davos. So if you're thinking of starting your own show and you're looking for some help, then send us a message, because we would absolutely love to bring your story to life and help you amplify your content while really connecting on a much deeper level with your audiences. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not proud of wearing so many hats.
I don't think it's a bad thing.
I think most people think it is a bad thing, and people tell me that, and friends say, why don't you just focus on one thing? And, but I don't know, somehow, whether I've got some condition, I don't know, but like
polymath.
I've always just, I've always loved connecting people and relationships and opportunities, and I do that as a manager because that's my job, is to see an opportunity and connect it. I see that through how I care about where this music goes, and so I've always had that sort of instinctive and inbuilt desire to like make great connections and make things happen. Sometimes to my benefit, many times not. So. I don't think it's a fault. I think I've created an ecosystem of people I trust who help me in my projects, or business partners or co-managers, whatever that might be. Yeah. And together we understand my strengths and their strengths. And you can't do all of those things you just described fully. You're half in some, you're half in others. I think being in management, you're all in. In other projects, you have a CEO, you have a general manager, you have people who drive and implement your vision. So for me, it's always just been about connecting the dots, and I think that's what it is for other people. I think if you're an artist, going back to your question a little bit, is one thing I've always tried to educate my artists is I've seen many very famous DJs reach the age of 50 and realise that they own nothing.
Like monetarily or asset-wise?
Asset-wise.
Yeah.
So they've got a great career and they can keep DJing. You hit 50, you can't keep that. You can't do 100 shows a year. Of course not. And you don't want to, and you can't. Yeah. But if you actually haven't built a brand or built a record label or a publishing entity or a festival or a sake brand or a technology company, you need to, and I say that to myself as well. Like I realised when I was 40 that what do I actually own? That I've actually got that potential, not just about money, but just realization of all the hard work you've done. So I think, and that doesn't mean that people shouldn't just live in the moment and just be free. And I see many DJs do that and they have a great life and they've got no stress. And I see someone like Rich who works so hard because of all of his projects and his companies. But I do think building an asset base and being educated that, and this comes from me, when I was probably one of the most famous things I ever did was a magazine called Music, M-U-Z-I-K. And I was 21 years of age. Someone offered £1 million to launch a magazine, to launch it, not to me. But no one ever came to me about ownership. I didn't have a lawyer at that time. My parents didn't know about that stuff. I was just like, yeah, great, pay me 40 grand a year. This is 25 years ago, which was a lot of money. And I'll work my arse off for this magazine. I gave my entire life to that magazine and to dance music. And then I came out of it after 5 years and was like, wow, I don't own this. IPC magazines own this, and it was fine. That's when I then became an entrepreneur, I guess, because I started to realize about owning your own, all the energy and time you put in, you need to own something of that. So I do think the younger people understand about that better, because it is important.
Well, we're moving into this creator kind of economy, and I think it's it's important to almost learn on someone else's dime, right? So you work for a company, you understand how it's done.
That's what I did. You're right.
But then you go and create it yourself, and because there's so many frustrations when when it's not yours in a way. I mean, some people aren't entrepreneurial driven and they don't want that life. Obviously, it comes with a lot of risk. But I think, to summarize, for sure, it's the team. And I think, like me, I'm passionate about these two things, music and motorsport. And people always wonder how on earth, but I say it's my yin and my yang. They both cannot exist without each other. Yeah. And you bring different aspects to that into both those industries.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I viewed it and looked at it. And I definitely take on too much. That's a fault, but that you learn over time. And now I'm at a point in my life where boundaries is everything. I'm a father now. I'm a husband. I have a different kind of responsibility, which is not too different to managing a talent, but it's ultimately it's about that connection. You've got to give yourself that time.
And talking about boundaries, because, we know that the music industry, the way that music gets done, the business part of it is a family. And of course, the boundaries can get slightly blurred. You're kind of working with people that become your close friends or already are your close friends. And this is not just unique to the music industry. Obviously, this topic is topical amongst many industries, but I'm just wondering how you see the involvement of professionalism in our industry, but also advice working with friends.
Yeah, I mean, I think being in business with people is, you should get into business ventures with people you trust and like. And many times you can't choose. Partners come with situations, you know, so you often can't choose them. And I've been in many ventures with people I can't believe I'm in business with you or them. But they came. As a choice, or they came with... They came because, you know, you're either representing an artist, and those are the partners that came on the other side. They're funding it. You know, when you're taking money, you can't necessarily choose that person. You know, so it's really, really difficult. I've generally had good experiences working with people who I call friends. Probably more so than people who I didn't call friends. So I don't think there's a problem with that, as long as you're, again, clear on boundaries. I've built very strong relationships in the business through friendships that became business partners or artists that I managed. Yeah. So, I think being a good judge of character is absolutely critical. And I've picked some good ones and I've picked some bad ones, you know, and still to this day, you know, but it's hard, you know. It's a bit like, I described it the other day, it's a bit like you have a relationship with someone, and you only when you live with them do you really see the reality of how they are as people. And it's the same with businesses. Sometimes you can be way too deep in before you realise, wow, that guy's actually not that trustworthy. Or I don't like how he conducts himself, or she. And so it's I think it's one of the hardest things in life, is choosing business partners. And then if it's not going right, how the hell do you get out of that situation? So it's one of the biggest challenges, I think, of this industry. Yeah,
but I think, you know, true friends want you to win, right? So they will absolutely. And when it's
trust, it's trust. I mean, that's to me about the artist-manager relationship is number one, trust. If you don't trust that person, don't be in that relationship. If you're the artist or the manager, absolutely. You know, and I think I've prided myself on that trust. People know I think that I will always be honourable, whether it comes to money and whether it comes to just having their back, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. It comes down to intuition as well. So last two questions for you, Ben. I mean, of course, we know that you are extremely passionate about champion change, and you have been doing that for so many decades. But, you know, the fact still remains that only 2% of producers in the industry, electronic music industry today, are female. And, you know, this is an industry that prides itself on being innovative, forward-thinking. And I'm sure we could probably sit here for hours and talk about this, but I just want to know, in summary, how can the scene take the right steps?
Well, I think we've done it with DJs, right? There's more female DJs than the music I'm close to, the more underground music. I mean, there are as many young female artists coming through as men. In fact, it's incredible. When it comes to producers, I agree it's less. I think we've got a huge issue still. I've done so much work with AFEM and with IMS to try to correct that balance, working closely with She Said So and Andrea, fully embraced how they think and how they work to make it work for my ventures. But I think it's about change at the top. Yeah. It's about changing the people who really are seen to control the industry. That needs a changing of the guard. You know, and that, I just think that takes time. I think there's more, you know, there was an AFEM meeting yesterday. It was 70% women on the executive board, 70% women versus men. 5 years ago, it was the complete opposite. It was 90-10. Yeah. So I think the change is there. It's happening, but it's happening at levels where it just needs another 3 to 5 years where more women are actually in real positions of power. And I think then that will inspire more and more people to get into the business.
Well, you know, I don't know if you know this, but in the UK, in the GCSE music system now, is actually music production and DJing forms like 60% of the grade, which is like amazing to see. And it's grassroots level, right? And that takes obviously time to implement. Yeah, final question, talking about timelines here. What is in your opinion, what is the single most important change that needs to happen 1 year from now, 5 years from now, and 10 years from now in the music industry?
My God, that's a question. Well, I think the PRO system is massive. That won't take 1 year. That's 10 years. And I think we're making steps in that direction. I think Web3 will kick at their heels, and all these new ways of monetizing and rewarding artists to go around the PROs because they just don't do their job properly is, over time, will have strong impact. To me, that's something. 25 years ago, I was at a PRS event in London. I was like 20 years of age, and someone tried to explain to me about how the PRS work. And I was just like, what? You know, and that's been going on for 25, 30 years. So that's crucial. I think the most urgent thing is the toxicity around bullying, around gender, sexual harassment, these issues that have become a huge part of AFEM. I don't know. I don't know what process we need to go through to flush out everyone's grievances and their issues, but the mindset needs to shift. And there are people running companies in our culture who are not aligned. They're playing lip service. And I just genuinely think people who came into this music out of a passion for the culture have got it right. And then there's loads of people who come into this business for music. So for money and monetary reasons and growing and selling businesses. And they're the ones who seem to get it wrong when it comes to like inspiring change in their companies or, you know, so I think there's a massive job to be done there that is urgent and immediate. And that to me is the next one you're thinking, it's not easy to fix that, but there are people trying. There are organisations fighting very hard to make people look very differently inwardly at the businesses they run or the festivals they run or the shows they're booking. You know, I think we did it on gender. We've achieved it on talent lineups. I very rarely now look at a lineup that's all male and I just go, wow, how did you fuck up so badly there? People get it.
Yeah.
Diversity is the next wave of that. But gender, and I feel much more, you know, I don't even need to say to my agents, there needs to be a female on that lineup. They know not to present that to me or Rich or other artists I work with without that. That's a massive achievement, but it's not enough. And so now it's about diversity, and then it's about companies. And I don't know, this was a beautiful industry when I got into it. It was a beautiful industry for most of it. Somehow I feel right now it's in a really negative corner and it's being backed into a corner, but it's, I think, a necessary flushing out of a lot of the issues that have been accumulated over time. Some of these companies have existed 25 years. They've been run by 5 different people in 10 years. And you know, change comes from the top. It comes from the top and the bottom, and it meets in the middle. And so I think, yeah, there's a long way to go. Yeah.
Well, I do think COVID flushed out a few of the bad players.
For sure.
You know, so that's a good step. Ben, thank you so much. An absolute honour, and, you know, thank you so much for your honest and unfiltered insights. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And yeah, all the best.
Thank you very much.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed having these conversations. If you want to grab a copy of today's show notes, then head over to missionmakers.com/ADE, where you'll also find notes from all of our previous episodes. And if you're interested in talking to me about future opportunities at ADE, producing podcasts, or coming down to some of my music and motorsports events, then you can reach out to me at Mission Makers or at dj.n1nja on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you as ever for listening. Until next time, keep it laser focused.